session, which we wanted to do this in a while ago, to present more or less completed version of a scaling readiness report. Sudan first, and then in maybe 1 or 2 weeks we follow up with Morocco one, and then we follow up with another thing with fine-tuned and updated notification of a report on synthesis. But that's why we are taking this in a stepwise. So here, Murat will present what is prepared so far in consultation with as much as possible with Sudanese colleagues. I have also invited National Technical Committee. I forwarded this invitation. I don't know if they will be able to join. I have spoken to them this morning. They were having National Technical Committee meeting today as an urgent matter to speed up few implementation activities in Sudan, because it's been taking so long to put this on paper, to confirm work plans, budgeting, and everything. So I hope they will be also joining. But I think Murat, you mentioned that you will be recording this session. Maybe we can share this with our NTC colleagues in Sudan, with all partners in Sudan, so they can track what is update on. I think this is further. And you are hearing me? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I pass it back to you, Murat, and then we catch up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Talk to you. Thanks a lot, Akmal. And I see that Alicia joined us as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rasha. Is there any problem from Dr. Ahmad's side? Hey, Alicia.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I think we're still waiting for Ahmed, our colleague here. Just give us a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining. As Akmal said, it's been a long while, and I hope you are doing all well. We will start actually going back to the course of what we agreed before, and in 2 weeks periods we will move on. We are starting with Sudan, and then we will build up from there. So let's see. We are waiting for Dr. Akmal, but I think I can quickly, go to the next slide. And yeah, so it's been a while. So sorry to really keeping you waiting, and but there was a reason, and I will try to explain it a bit later as well. Through the we had really major advances, and then for a while there was a gap, and that's mostly coming from my side. Apologies for the delay I caused for our work. As I said, I will try to catch up, and we will quickly come back to the course.
Connected now?
And yeah, I suggest we make a small round of introduction, although we know each other. I can see Alicia for the first time, and Dr. Ahmed is also here. Hello, Dr. Ahmed. Can you hear us?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you well, and I think the other colleagues as well. It's great to see you.
So how are you doing?
Good. Very busy, but good.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly everywhere.
Yeah.
These days I think IFAD is really a very nice organizational landscape to be in, and the other organizations I'm working are all through reforms. CGIAR and GIZ and so on. So it really creates.
So good to hear this impression about IFAD.
Yes, I think, you can tell, of course, better, but I think you are the lucky ones these days. So we will go for a round of introduction, but Alessandra, do you have any updates from Isabel? I think she was joining.
Yeah, she's connected. I see her connected.
Okay, excellent.
And yeah.
That's excellent. So yes, and also Svetlana here as well.
Yes,
so
good afternoon, Murat. I had some problem to connect to this app. Sorry.
Sorry. Apologies from my side. This is a sort of new app and for like online collaboration. And you know me, I try to look for new toys all the time and bring it in our community, but there are good reasons, and I will try to explain later. But I think now we can go to short round of introduction. So Akmal made actually the welcoming. It would be great if we can introduce briefly ourselves, starting from, let's say, Isabel then. And then we will move on. Isabel, can you briefly introduce yourself and refresh our memories?
Of course. So good afternoon. I don't know how to switch on the webcam, so sorry for this. So my name is Isabel, and I am the regional analyst in the Near East, North Africa and Europe division. And I'm also managing this grant, the scheme grant with ICARDA. Very happy to discover the results of the scaling readiness for Sudan.
Great.
Look forward to this. Thank you, Murat.
Thank you very much, Isabel. If you want to open the camera, it's on the left bar. There is the butter sign. There is microphone and camera.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, found it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
It's great to see you. Yeah, Alessandra, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Alessandra Garbero, lead regional economist in Near East North Africa division. Thanks, over.
Thank you very much. Rasha, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon and good morning to all. My name is Rasha Omar. I'm the country director for Sudan and Djibouti. And similar to Isabel, looking forward to the results of the scheme work in Sudan. Over.
Dr. Ahmad, I think everybody knows you, but briefly, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Ahmed Subahi. I am the country program officer for Sudan. And I have been part of this initiative. I hope that we can see something that that can be appreciated by all of us. So
Great.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Valerio?
Good day, everyone. I'm Valerio Graziano, supporting the scheme project as Knowledge Management Officer.
And we have from our team, Svetlana. I think she's... Svetlana, are you still here? I think she was is around, but... And also Alessia. This is the first time I see. Welcome, Alessia. I think, can you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Sure, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Alessia Marazzi, I'm a program officer for Sudan and Djibouti in the IFAD country office. And yeah, really looking forward to knowing more about the scheme initiative.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. So I think when Svetlana joins, she can introduce herself briefly. So now it's time for going to the presentation. Before going to presentation, I will actually briefly mention scaling readiness. Since we actually had the interaction from about scaling readiness, for the case of Moldova, there has been some changes. First, I would like to introduce briefly for the colleagues who has never seen before, and also introduce some of the updates. And then we will connect back to Sudan. And I think it's important I also wanted to present scaling readiness because the learning we create through complete studies for our IFAD cases directly feeds into CGIAR reform processes. So one of the good development that has been happening, and partially why I am a bit delayed as well, the CGIAR system is, as you know, it's an international research system. It's going on reform, and they were looking for new ways of understanding innovations. And we really showcased what we did together for the Moldova. And now we're going to do the same for Sudan. And what we do together, in a nutshell, actually creates a bridge with the CGIAR in terms of learning about innovations. So what is scaling readiness? For those colleagues who haven't heard before, it is actually an attempt for integrating research and innovation processes. That's an approach basically initially developed for CGIAR to introduce an innovation perspective for development. In the development or in development investments, while working on our solutions, we innovate a lot. And scaling readiness try to understand that innovative part of our programs and projects or interventions. It is indeed coming from a previous history of readiness, which is NASA. Scaling readiness was inspired by NASA's early attempts to measure the innovations and try to understand how innovations advance as projects and programs evolve. One of the other things with the scaling readiness, which can be different, it aims to measure. So it aims to measure technical excellence of a solution and how it changes through time, and also try to measure the use of different solutions. By combining the technical excellence and use of the solution, it tries to understand how much impact potential we can achieve with different innovative solutions. Here you see different graphs. These are from livestock sector. They are very similar to our work in Sudan. Of course, Sudan is much broad, but usually the scaling readiness given metric view of how we are doing in terms of innovation performance. And then that is the news part to our colleagues as well. Since we last met, scaling readiness has moved on a little bit, and it started to support especially innovation prioritization of larger innovation attempts. You probably heard a lot of challenges and grand challenges on innovations and startups. We started to support actually how we can measure all these 1,000 innovations potential to achieve impact in different countries and inform, let's say, FAO and CGIAR so far, how they can prioritize all those innovations they need to assess. There are basically 6 cases that scaling readiness can help with. It's about project management, it's about portfolio management, informs about stakeholders, gives prioritization, does evidence management, and do innovation science. In our Sudan case, actually, we cover most of it. The full report gives information about small portfolio nature resource governance Sudan, provides some insights about which stakeholder can help, directly provides evidence on what has been done on natural resource governance, and indeed, in the future, if you have interest, produce science out of it. And this is just one example where I want to show what we did before with Moldova. The profile here on the right actually will feed into CGIAR database. So what scaling readiness does, to having these complete studies, we really do a deep dive of innovations and their components. And this informs actually other projects who can possibly use it. So we already did for Moldova, and we will inform CGIAR what we're doing in Sudan. And here in the presentation, you see the different versions of sharing this information. It can be either done in the form of dashboards. This shows an example from Egypt and basically most of the Sudan region, how we can characterize innovations and show it in a dashboard for different program needs. And on the right side, you see different profiles, 1-pagers or 2-pager documents to share the innovation information with our partners. So I will skip this one, but indeed we can use what we've done to have a deep dive on which projects, let's say the red dots, are working which innovations. You see all sort of hearts and crosses. They show different types of innovations. The idea is here to understand all the projects, the red dots and their innovations, and try to bring them together so that we have to see the synergies across different projects, if they are working on the same innovations, if they are working on the same innovations, how we can coordinate the action. So this is a bit, scaling readiness. I wanted to give this to see the use prospects of our report. I will show the details, but if any of these users are interesting for improving the impact performance of natural resource governance in Sudan, please let us know. We will try our best to not only support you, but also link you with the rest of the innovation world. Maybe there are some programs or projects already working in Sudan and doing similar efforts. And for now, so what we have is, I'm skipping this here. Like so far, as you know, we did already this process in Moldova. We had our first scaling readiness full complete study on the left side, and then we wrote blogs together with IFAD colleagues. This is in the presentation slide. You see it in the example from the UCIP, but we actually published a blog in also the ICARDA website, but as far as I know, a shorter version on IFAD internal webpage. And our blog was also well received by the CGIAR, and it's showcased indeed in one of the key products of CGIAR in its news. And while we were keeping silent, we also translated the report into Russian and Romanian, and then soon we'll share the copies, the full design copies with our colleagues in Moldova and also with IFAD. And hopefully there are some hard copies. I don't know how we can best organize. I would like to ask also our IFAD colleagues how we can send the hard copies of these as well. So, sorry, I took a while for me to introduce or do the background, but now we are going to the Sudan case. But maybe I will have a small break here and ask if you have any clarification questions so far. You can just unmute yourself. I think we're a small team and we can go directly. Do you have any questions? Okay. So now then the real content comes. We have a Sudan case. So what we exactly? Okay, Alessandra, sure. So what about Sudan? So what we did, the same as the other complete study, we try to understand the nature resource governance framework and sustainable natural resource and livelihood program in Sudan from innovation and scaling lens. So what we did, we'd have initial interactions with IFAD colleagues and also some with the guidance of Dr. Ahmad, some stakeholders and colleagues from Sudan, and try to understand actually when we say natural resource governance framework or the livelihood program, what do we mean? We managed to access to almost 50 resources, not all of them are Sudan, trying to highlight the innovative capacity and the performance of governance and livelihood program. And then we did indeed prepare a draft study. At the end of our presentation, we will share you the draft text and you will be, we will be very happy to have your feedback. And here, initially, we had the feedback from, significant feedback from Gumar Kalo. I think he was going to suggest he participate, but I don't know what happened. And then Dr. Subahi in Russia. But if you have any other comments, please let us know, and we will make sure that your contributions are integrated and also presented. So what we found out when we look at the governance program, the first thing or the overall thing we discovered was that it's an innovative framework. So although natural resource governance framework in the way that's been done in Sudan has been implemented in other contexts and other countries, actually in Sudan, it has a lot of novel elements. And what we discover also while the studying is that most of the natural resource governance program around the world focus on resource use, effectiveness, and efficiency. But the new resource governance framework, we also saw a significant interest and focus and activities on inclusivity and sustainability. We found that actually by this inclusivity and sustainability, and especially inclusivity elements, natural resource governance framework is quite innovative in natural resource management for Sudan. We identified 23 different components that are critical for success, and 10 of these actually seems to be more novel. And we also found out that natural resource governance framework is not just only a programmatic structure, but it includes or combines different approaches, processes, platforms, digital systems, and teams. So in a nutshell, Nature Resource Governance Framework is actually a composite innovation with different innovations of different nature. And on the right side, you see those 10. We thought that quite novel. And in the report, you will see quite a detailed articulation of what they are. But basically, when we are referring to natural resource governance in Sudan, we actually think about really a composite innovation, combining, let's say, a cluster and network approach, including a participation innovation approach. There are some platforms, drought and flood monitoring systems, and so on. So the first message we got from our study, Nature Resource Governance Framework, is not just a simple policy or reference approach, but it has multiple elements that are quite innovative. And then this was the qualitative or overall conceptual analysis. And then we did the metric analysis by using two different axes. Basically, the vertical axis refers to documentation on technical excellence. What it does, for example, if we have subnational innovation platforms as a part of the NRGF, what is the documented performance of those platforms in Sudan? And that we found that is a number of 6, and then we mapped it here. So the vertical shows the technical excellence based on documentation. Horizontal shows a classified or qualified adoption. If we are actually at the level of 0, 1, 2, we are talking about our project partner or the intervention partner using the elements of Nature Resource Governance Framework. As we go towards 9, we started to see that the elements of Nature Resource Governance Framework are actually used by stakeholders who are not incentivized by the program or by the governance framework. So in a nutshell, our objective in this graph to increase the vertical as up as possible, to show that we studied, we understood, we improved the technical excellence, and also to move the circles towards rights to show that the users or the stakeholders who are actually using the nature or participating in nature resource governance are not the only one that are being incentivized, but also the ones that participate and use it for their own benefit without incentivization. When we made the analysis, we found that actually, as you see, most of the circles cluster around the level. And basically the reason, and 6 refers to actually an application, or in this nature resource governance framework that has been shown to work in similar countries, but currently we don't know how it actually works in Sudan. When we did the systematic analysis, it was really challenging to find documents on the majority or holistic view on nature resource governance framework. Although we have support from Dr. Subahi and Goma, we couldn't really identify sufficient evidence. So what we found out in terms of readiness is that most of the components of the nature resource governance framework has been shown to work similar circumstances, but we are not sure yet for Sudan. Even though we might sure that documentation is not publicly accessible yet, that means that actually the learning we can create around them is limited. And similarly, when we look at the use levels of different components, basically these 10 things, flood monitoring system, investment framework, and so on. See, we found that actually they are mostly clustered on use level 3. And what this use level 3 means, actually, we started to see different stakeholders becoming a part of the program, but almost all of them are incentivized by the program itself. We couldn't get to documentation that actually components of nature resource governance framework and its previous implementation by adopted without really incentivization structures. So in a nutshell, when we do the metric analysis, we realize that the current configuration of nature resource governance framework has been shown to work in other contexts, but we don't know how it is in Sudan yet, or at least it's not documented. Of course, I'm sure that our partners in IFAD knows it, but it's not publicly visible yet. And also, the users we can access or document for now are part of our intervention.
Murat, can I ask a question just for
Sure.
clarification?
Please go ahead, Alessandra.
So basically, so you evaluate this as a potential innovation for Sudan, right?
Is it exact potential? This is an innovation in Sudan already, but it's potential for impact at scale.
Okay, which means that the application is limited, or
it means that, like in application, we have documentation for the components that actually they work, but we don't have studies and also analysis showing that in Sudanese context where we implement, it is being shown to work and contribute to impact. So if currently, for example, most of them are 6, it means they are designed well, they've been programmed well, but their performance we haven't documented yet. So if we see that those components, for example, the monitoring system contributes to policy action or intervention action, and we see that that benefits different stakeholders, we will start to see from 6 to 9. Is it clear? Great. And then similarly, like use level, we have 3. It means that we have documentation of only the stakeholders whom we incentivize to use this governance framework, but we don't have documentation for the other partners who are not incentivized, other stakeholders who are not incentivized for us. So as we see natural resource governance framework adopted by, let's say, private sector agencies who do not have funding from us, we will see that it's moving from 3 to 9. So this was the quantitative findings we could do. And then when we also look at the circles, you see that one of them is on the left. And of course, although they are already, all of them are at the same vertical, which means technical excellence is documented excellence similar, is not being utilized or used much. And when we look at that component, it was actually a mechanism for co-prioritization of investment option. When we look at the natural resource governance framework, we realize that most of the components actually program into well, and there are design and some applications already. But in terms of how we co-prioritize natural resource investments, we couldn't find any reference. We see that in other countries, in the similar approaches to natural resource governance framework, which is more inclusive, there's also an element for co-prioritization of innovations, which means if we're going to support, which kind of activities we will support. In making that decision, how much of our stakeholders from different sectors or communities can influence. For that, we couldn't find any documentation. So the results of the analysis show that, if you want to really improve the current potential of the natural resource governance framework, we need to identify a mechanism for including the other stakeholders and communities in deciding the investments and prioritization of those investments. This was one of the results coming, but as I said before, most of the documentation are very similar, except the lack of use or lack of the clear use of the co-prioritization by stakeholders. We couldn't find any divergence. So this was about the natural resource governance framework. It was actually a policy framework and also programmed, but we have also a big natural resource governance and livelihoods program. So initially, when we had interactions with the Sudan team and also the stakeholders, we realized that actually the SNRLP in Sudan has the elements of NRGF, but advances it and adds up some other organizational and institutional innovations. So what we saw was that the program itself introduces some innovations. And when we do the deep dive analysis, we did that there is 6 different things. And one of them is a strategy, 2 of them a plan. You see on the full list on the right side, we saw that actually when we talk about SNRLP from an innovation perspective, we not only refer to NRGF, but more. And you can see some of those differences. We see that actually SNLRP really makes quite a big advance, capitalizing the learning, of course, from the NRGF, but as more novel elements. And what we realize is when we look at the nature of those new elements, we saw that actually SNLRP connects the governance framework to broader sectoral and social cultural systems. So it's not about the policy and programmatic structure now. It's about other sectors, but it's also about communities, and the social systems and cultural systems are communities embedded. And of course, one of the findings we did is, well, now the SNLRP scope is much more complex. And because it actually goes broader, it probably needs significant amount of engagement from non-governmental actors and representative of community engagement, community engaging supports. So we realize is that, when we think about SNLRP, we should go a little bit beyond the scope of NRGF and start thinking about behaviors, community dynamics, and social systems. And we try to do the metric analysis on this time to the SNLRP. Sorry for the typo here, but we got a similar picture. Most of the elements we saw, actually, when we look at the evidence, how they work, is very similar to NRGF. Again, we saw that similar to the other one, the NRGF, the multi-stakeholder investment prioritization element wasn't visible. But interestingly, we saw that most of the documentation was around actually conflict management options or conflict management practices. Interestingly, or maybe not that interestingly, we have much better documentation and much broader use of conflict resolution mechanisms in Sudan currently. But rather than that, the pictures are very quite similar. Of course, one reason that they share components, but the other reason was that we will come back. In terms of documentation, we don't have much progress, or we couldn't access much of the documentation on Sudan natural governance and livelihood nexus. And one of the things actually we would like to thank, or maybe to also highlight, is that most of the documentation we can access in natural resource governance framework was coming from IFAD. This shows that first, it's really great that there is significant documentation and preparation by IFAD, but it also shows a possible gap that we might need to encourage the other stakeholders. We will come back later to study, to work on, and to provide evidence and insights about the components of sustainable natural resource program. And then what was the first step? We identify similarly, we need to really think about how we can design or incorporate an investment prioritization, a collaborative investment prioritization option for Sudan. And even since it's actually a core component, not only for the natural resource framework, but also the livelihood framework, it might indeed be better to formally institutionalize that investment prioritization and create a space, continuous space, for the actors from civil society and private sector and the communities to have more say on investment prioritization, and in the later stages for themselves to contribute to the efforts of the government and IFAD to improve the natural resource government in Sudan. So in a nutshell, what did the complete study find and recommends? There are a lot of things in the report you will see. Synthesizing was not that easy, but what we saw, three major things. The first, it is really critical to document the process dimensions of the natural resource governance framework and the program, because both of them are actually have a quite innovative organizational and institutional arrangement. And for organizational and institutional arrangement, since they touch upon the society, processes are very important. And what we recommend is really establish, document, and establish some mechanisms to process not only the output and outcomes but also the processes, so that we create learning how the natural resource governance has been working. And hopefully by then the national and international academy will have a better say and contribute to the policy making around natural governance. So the first thing we identify was that we need to document processes better and open it up for maybe the broader scientific and knowledge community. And the second thing we recommend was that establishing a systematic knowledge management architecture, which we've been doing actually with partial contributions from SCIM, is very relevant. And we should, as also the IFAD evaluation report said, we should find mechanism to incentivizing partnership between Sudanese government, local universities, research units, and us international community to do knowledge management in a more systematic way. Because we've been in the IFAD and national government have been innovating quite a bit of organizational arrangements. And we need actually have a knowledge management architecture that can support the learning and enhances actually the impact of the programs. And finally, as I said before, the co-prioritization investment is very important, because sustainable natural resource and livelihood program cut across different sectors, touch upon the communities. It really creates, it engages private sector. So it's very important to already think about an institutional system, how they can contribute in identifying where to put the money, to be very quickly, so that at later stages, they can also invest. Currently, we know the conditions in Sudan. Of course, government and international partners, led by IFAD, we play a significant role, but we should already start thinking how we can encourage private sector and communities to be an active part of investment decisions and even support investment by themselves. So this is all from my side. I hope it wasn't too much. There is more details in the report, and we will share it shortly, but we try to actually share, let's say, the highlights of the report. So over to you for the questions. If you would like to go a little bit, use the tool on the left side before microphone wide video share, you will see a react. There you can respond. You can use different icons that I've been using for the different questions. Or if you have any comment, question, idea, you can use the option on the left side and let us know you have a comment, question, or an idea. This is the Q part that you will see. But if you want to also talk, please go ahead, because we are a small group. So over to you for questions and comments and feedbacks.
So maybe just a question of clarification also to Rush and the colleagues on the criteria for selecting this innovation, right? Because, of course, if an innovation, you're evaluating the potential of an innovation, it won't materialize on the ground, right? You don't have any evidence, you don't have documents. So it's a bit of, so I guess if you want that, you need to evaluate past innovations for projects that are closed. So my understanding is that ESAN LLP, I cannot pronounce, it's a new project, right? And so basically, maybe question to Rush and the team to elaborate a bit on this, and then I have other questions so that I can maybe see whether my questions are appropriate or not.
Okay.
So over to you.
Thank you, Alessandra. And I would suggest also Ahmed can expand. Now, we selected the natural resource governance framework because this was a framework that was developed during the Butana Integrated Rural Development Project, and is also, it is referred to in our country strategy for policy engagement. And it's also being replicated in the Sustainable Natural Resources and Livelihoods Program. and aspects of it were also replicated in the livestock marketing and resilience program. So that's why we wanted a more complete documentation, if you want, of this particular framework, because we were going to use it for the implementation of SNRLP going forward, but also for policy engagement. And I'll hand over to Ahmed if he has additional comments.
Yes, Russia, and let me start by saying, really, I am impressed with this very good analysis for what we have already provided for this scaling up readiness. And as Russia mentioned, Alessandra, and by the way, all the findings, they are quite logic with the stage of the development of this framework, because it is early started in the Butana Integrated Rural Development Project. This is the first time such kind of process to be started in Sudan. And I can say this is one of the innovations that can be recorded for IFAD interventions in Sudan. And with Butana project, then we think about just if there is any possibility or potentiality to replicate this process and approach in other projects. And as Russia already mentioned, that we tried to replicate this in the LMRP, the Livestock Marketing and Resilience Program. And now what the recommendations and the findings of this analysis, it can be very good for strengthening the process by it is upscaling within the SNRP project. All the points that mentioned with regard to the lack of evidences and sufficient documentation and engagement of other stakeholders like private sector and others, this is really comes at the right time for real upscaling for this intervention and process in Sudan. So I think all the findings, they are quite logic for the stage of the development of this approach and process. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Before giving the floor to Alessandra, really also, Alessandra, when you look at the program documentation, you really see the historical build-up. So I was quite pleasantly surprised and actually quite intrigued how the learnings from different IFAD projects on Bitera and so on was integrated into the livelihood program. So in a nutshell, those components, some of them were early experimentation from the Natural Resource Governance Framework work project. And then there were some work like components coming from the markets. That's why the livestock markets and we have the private sector. But in the program, they've been actually fed into a single system. But to complement what has been documented by the program proposal, we also looked at the other natural resource governance in different surrounding countries in the region. We look at Egypt, we looked at Ethiopia, for the livestock sector, a little bit even towards even Uganda, to see actually how different implementation of natural resource governance is made. That's where we also started to see the critical role of early inclusion of private sector and other civil society organizations, not only users or receivers of, let's say, investment, but also thinkers and possibly and hopefully sooner investors on the natural resource governance. Over to you, Alessandra.
Maybe if you allow me, Dr. Murad, before Alessandra can step in, just to emphasize on a point that you have already mentioned with regard to the transitional stage in Sudan. As you are quite know, Sudan now is passing through a transitional period where there is no stable government. Everything is on transitional in terms of structure, systems, regulations, whatever that related to the governance. So this is a transitional period. You cannot expect a very committed regime and well-established and stable regime to take over these issues properly. Over.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Alessandra.
Thanks. No, thanks so much. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, as also Isabel has questions, but maybe because I need to leave and I wanted to offer a few comments, right? Because I know the instability of Sudan and the context matter for stakeholders' engagement, right? But also we've been discussing also with Russia and other country director on this is an innovation for policy engagement, correct, Russia? So basically, what I think the conclusion are very interesting also in light of the stock take, but we will have next week.
Yeah.
But when we talk about systematic knowledge management, is that monitoring policy processes is remarkably difficult, and even more difficult in fragile situations, right, with political instability. So when we say document processes, can we be more specific and establish granular indicators, granular policy indicators, for which we can track then to evaluate whether evaluate the system, right? Because you say this is an approach that has different has different components, if I understood correctly, an ecosystem-based cluster approach, multi-stakeholder investment options, intra-state collaboration platforms, and so forth, right? So all of this have different stakeholders. And so maybe you need to set up a qualitative structure, right, with interviews to see whether these different elements are performing, and then score them into a policy indicator that then we can report at the end of a project to say, I would say, okay, this has worked, this has not worked. So I think it's more setting up the right M&E system for policy indicators, I think, which basically involve also evaluating the partnership with the stakeholders and the riskiness of this partnership. Sorry.
Exactly. So actually, that's why we said systematic knowledge management architecture, but we didn't go one step beyond, because to understand what kind of, the toolkit would fit to Sudan currently is a bit challenging. And we need leadership of, Rasha, Dr. Ahmed, and also the other colleagues. What could be the tools that can fit for purpose? What we can do, bring in IFAD's learning, because IFAD is a global organization and working with different contexts. And there's actually also the Athena. I still remember there's a lot of tools and things developed there that can fit. But also from our CGIAR side, CGIAR usually tries to aim for the top-notch innovations. And then there are a few ideas that can come there. For example, for the livestock, there's a lot of now satellites imagery and so on to see what's going on. Creating market models from using satellites, seeing the pathways of animals and how they can be actually, where can be the safest markets. Or in terms of processes, sometimes the different analog phones capture some data. And by actually seeing who is where and how they come together through the cellular phones, we started to see the collaboration patterns. So in a nutshell, the clear answer to that can only be given by the leadership of the colleagues in Sudan, because they are the ones that know. But I think from the IFAD side, there's already quite a few tools that might be relevant. We can also, from CGIAR side, give a few ideas. But the exact form is to find out is, as you said, Alessandra, we need to actually discuss and come together to find out what works best. I hope that's an answer.
No, thanks so much.
Isabel, sorry keeping you waiting, but the conversation was very nice.
Yeah, no, of course. No, indeed. In fact, I agree with what Alessandra said. I was also thinking, yes, that it's very interesting to look at it from the angle of the policy engagement and to see how the knowledge management is supporting this process. So in the case of the NRGF, I think it's quite a recent achievement now in Sudan. I don't remember, Ahmed can tell us when it was exactly this framework was established. So, but still, I think it would be interesting also to understand the contribution of the other projects in this process. And what SNLRP, of course, is going to capitalize on what has been done before. You have mentioned that you have looked at other similar framework for natural resource management in other countries, and I think it would be also useful to have more details to compare now what is the level of achievement in these countries compared to Sudan, and maybe it will be helpful to understand what needs to be done now to bring it to the next level. You said, you mentioned the role of the other stakeholders engaging private sector actors also. I think it's very relevant because we had a discussion yesterday with Russia and the team for the other project for IMDP, and we have noticed that they have still difficulties in making progress in this area. So I think this is really something we need to understand better, how this platform, multi-stakeholder platform, can be adapted now to the Sudan context. So I will stop there, but
there are,
yeah,
I think, there of course there are many options, but some of the options that comes to on top of my mind, for example, community-based breeding programs in Ethiopia are very successful.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have experience on that. And one of the reasons was that, like initially the idea is that we will have a breeding program, well-designed, driven by the science and research, but access to rural Ethiopia was difficult, and some of the, challenges that Sudan experiences was replicated there. So, the government and the other partners come up with a more decentralized breeding program and try to increase the ownership of the local stakeholders. In some of the rural areas, actually it works. So now, although its efficiency, let's say, is less than and government-led and big breeding program, it's working quite well because with the lesser ambitions, but it's locally owned. The second one was, this is also from Ethiopia, study in the vaccination, for example. They tried to experiment how they can improve the vaccination in different regions, and they started to experiment with the different stakeholders if they can take a lead in vaccination. One focused on the youth, rural youth. Can they become, some kind of veterinary servicing the villages? And some others actually were trying to, focus on women. A bit of experimenting. The results are a bit not necessarily that clear. But what was that like there are some examples of community-led livestock programs, especially I'm more aware, that can be informing what we can do in Sudan. But also the other thing is that it was very interesting. Livestock is an asset for everyone in the region. It has multiple intersections with social cultural systems, but it's an asset. So everybody tries to protect them. By using this, local community members can be incentivized to lead investments. And there are a few, like models there too. I know one very well from Ghana. It's a bit far away. But in a nutshell, we looked at different options and tried to mention them. But if we have a clear question in a sector, I think it's easier for us to contribute with some of the ideas and develop models that can inform colleagues in Sudan.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Maybe Russia and the team can come up with clear questions, for you to focus. Yeah. What do you think, Russia and Ahmed?
I'll give the floor to Ahmed Isabel.
Yeah,
if he has any thoughts.
Yes, Isabel, thank you so much. And I would like just to emphasize on the fact that the Butana Integrated Rural Development Project, it was completed in 2019. And it has a first component. It has a first component that relates to policy and institutional improvement. So the development of this natural resources governance framework, it came under this component. And really speaking, frankly speaking, the project didn't manage to make a breakthrough only in the last 2 years. before completion. And as you know, this process is a lengthy process that starts with the conferences at the community level. Then these conferences go up to the locality and to the state, and finally to the national level. It was a time-consuming process. And fortunately, after some delays, we managed to get this brilliant consultant, Dr. Juma, who managed to lead this process up to the stage that now we can see the outcome of it. And for sure, the issues of the policy indicators and the proper engagement of the M&E just to find out the real indicators for the achievements on the policy issues. This is something that we need to consider. And I can see the recommendations already Dr. Murad highlighted in this presentation. They are really quite useful for us. If we can take from here onward, we can improve our activities within this framework, even through the SNRP project and onward. And even we can take the whole thinking on how we can try to maximize our use from the knowledge management products. And as you know, we are just relying on the knowledge management products just to show evidences and to influence the policy makers to take the right actions and decisions with regard to policy reform. So I believe this study, it came at the right time that we can pick all the findings in this study so as to improve our future performance with regard to the policy engagement issues. So thank you so much for Dr. Murad for this very useful analysis for our case. Over.
Okay. Isabel, would you like to continue? Otherwise, I will ask
No,
Nadia.
thank you. I really appreciate what Ahmed has said now, and think we should try to take stock of this analysis and apply it for SNLRP, on the KM aspect.
Yeah, noted. Nadir, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear.
Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I want to thank Mr. Murad actually for this informative presentation. Although I came a little bit late. I am Dr. Nadir Yusuf Hamdan, Livestock Marketing and Resilience Program. It is IFAD funded project, and actually now we are in the completion stage. The project is actually be closed on coming September, but now is in the completion state, and actually we are having some natural resources projects actually to be enhanced during this period of extension. Actually, fortunately, IFAD has granted a period of 6 months extension for livestock, and mainly will be implemented through natural resources projects actually funded by GEF. And it is a good actually opportunity for us actually to go through this natural resources government framework. Actually, we can get this chance and try even to enhance for during this coming 4 months to enhance our projects actually willing to the recommendations actually come from this presentation. I want to thank also, I don't know, because I heard Isabel Suarez is here. I don't know whether she is. Isabel, she worked with World Bank before or in Khartoum, because if she is, actually she was actually one of my references in my CVs. Thank you a lot, actually.
It
Thank you a lot, and over.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've never worked for the World Bank, but I'm very happy if I can.
Yes.
But I've been working on the Sudan program for a long time with Russia when she was first the CD. And now I'm the regional analyst in NEN.
I see. So it's like a spillover impact, Isabel. Positive impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Documentation.
Yeah.
It's great. Is there any questions of clarification or any other comments? If not, we can go for actually the next steps or the way forward. But let's see actually if we have any other questions, clarifications. Okay, for the way forward, like we will share, of course, the presentation slides and also the recording for some of those colleagues who had the challenges and joined late with you. And then also we will share the draft. We already have 80%, let's say, completed design. I think the design version will be better to read for you. So it will be coming in a week or so. And then we are really encouraging you to contribute as much as you can. The critical part is really the executive summary for most of us. But for other colleagues who want to go deep dive, they are always welcome and we'll be happy to have the contributions. And I don't know, Isabel, if you would like to make a few, comments, or how do you see we can continue? And also if Akmal, I think he's still having challenges with his microphone, but if he can come back.
Yeah, we can give the floor to Akmal. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Akmal, can you hear us? I think he has the issue with the phone. He's trying to set it up. For now, you can go ahead, and I will also ask Rasha and other colleagues how they see the way forward. They already signaled actually what's possible, but it could be have a round of feedbacks. So over to you, Isabel.
Thank you. Well, I think it would be good to hear from Rasha and the team how they would like to take this recommendation forward, and if you are going to share the full report, maybe we can add a little bit of details on the NRGF process. I think it would be useful not to understand. As Ahmed has explained, it has been a long process, and maybe we can explain how the Butana project has contributed to this achievement, and what is going on now in SNRP. What else can we? And then I don't know if we are planning to have other meetings to present this finding to Sudan. I don't know if Russia finds that there is some interest maybe to discuss with other stakeholders in Sudan. Yeah, I think I will leave the floor to Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. So, on the natural resource work in particular, LMRP has and Dr. Nader's team have done three major works. The first one was the inclusion of climate change adaptation within the natural resource management strategy of Sudan. The second is that they have also listed all the policy issues related to natural resources by state and developed a roadmap by state and at federal level to address them. And the third document that they are currently preparing with the Range and Pasture Administration is to develop a natural, what they call range and pastures policy paper. So all these three documents are building on the experience of the Livestock Marketing and Resilience Program, as well as what you've mentioned, Isabel, the earlier projects. This whole aspect has been initially developed with South Kordofan, which started, this whole work addressing the stock routes that were crossing the Habila semi-mechanized areas and developing conflict resolution for the pastoralists and the settled farmers and the semi-mechanized farmers around there. And then it continued from there in the successive projects. So we'll use I really need to read the document to understand the content and how it can be used. Our main issue is enforcement of the existing policies. And this whole facilitation process is really to basically promote awareness about the policy measures, as well as address enforcement of local legislation, as well as the federal and state legislations. And then finally, to be able to better regulate the movement of the livestock so that they do not degrade either water or rangeland resources. And similarly, basically to contain the horizontal spreading of farming. So that's a bit the driving force behind the natural resource governance framework. So I have to see what the document has to say, and then we can, we'll probably be synthesizing based on all the other work that LMRP and SNRLP are already doing. Over.
Thank you very much. It's like the synthesis, I think, really important. The key word here, and we can also try to see how we can contribute to the existing efforts and if there's any gaps. So what I was going to say, Rasha, if you feel any gaps in innovations and models and so on, it could be great if you can inform us. We can quickly see what kind of learning we can chip in from the, let's say, the CGIAR system, and also of course the IFAD colleagues at the center. Because there is the Natural Resource Management Community, if I'm not mistaken, right, Isabel? There can be also some learning coming from them as well.
Yeah, Murad, if you can allow me to step in at this stage, particularly whenever I hear the learning, then I need to respond to this word. You remember, Dr. Murad, I started to communicate with you last year on provision of some technicalities and capacities to our knowledge management core team here in Sudan. And it is quite obvious that there is a big gap in just having a systemic way in dealing with the knowledge management and then the policy issues with regard to the right approach just to handle such very important issues. So I think with the presence and participation of Isabel, it will be a good opportunity that I can just raise this request for a provision of a training program for our knowledge management core team here in Sudan, from the perspectives of these indicators, how they can develop indicators on the policy engagement issues, as well as the knowledge management products in general. So I hope it will be the right time to just raise this issue once again. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe this is a good opportunity maybe to document the NRGF process, no? To maybe KM note on this.
Isabel, the process is documented. Dr. Goma had documented it.
Okay.
It's probably, we need to check if the documentation is in Arabic. If it's in Arabic, we can get it translated.
Yeah, if we can get this translation, yeah, that would be a good occasion. Then when we release this, the report, maybe we can also disseminate.
Russia, it is in English.
It's in English. Okay, very good.
Okay, excellent.
So we can translate it into Arabic then for wider audience.
Yes.
And even if you like, if you don't have it, Isabel, I will share the document with you.
Yeah, with pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ahmed.
Yeah.
Because we are working on this, on the policy process for the stock tech. So
Yeah.
I'm also, collecting all the documents and planning to maybe when we have time to write something. So yeah, that's very useful.
Yeah, I was going to actually give you the floor, Valerio. Please go ahead.
Hi all. Akmal is having some technical issue in conveying his message, so I'll be his voice for what he sees as a way forward on this. And he would suggest that stakeholders on ground might find suitable to work on other innovations, especially linking to the Sudan Knowledge Management Core Group in close collaboration with the Scheme National Technical Committee. They can discuss the outputs of the skilling report and advise back, of course. And a scheme will be happy to hear feedbacks, of course, on practical level, which were all of the points raised before, also on many concerns on probing the actual efficacy on ground, and maybe further documentation and data could be found peering into these networks. Another point right now, he apologizes. He would have possibly contributed more without sound. Was a little bit difficult, and in order to help him in the efforts, he's conveying additional points. The experiences, outputs of the implemented activity, projects, programs could benefit from boosting in knowledge sharing, and also that is something that could be done as a way forward to try and give more access to this information that we are peering into through the scaling readiness action. And from this, bringing to the surface this knowledge, it could be possible to analyze for more lessons learned that could, of course, iterate the process of informing scaling readiness and further action.
Thank you very much. So I'm looking at actually our participant list, and then we have Omar. Can you hear us, Omar? Do you have any feedbacks and comments? He wants to share the screen. I don't know if it's intentional or not. Is it the microphone, or maybe it's the... Omar, can you hear us? We cannot hear you, but let me try to unmute you. Omar, can you hear us? I think there's a problem there. And I see also maybe Omar can solve the problem. Alessia, do you have any feedbacks and comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No, thanks. I think it's just been really interesting, and I think it will be even more interesting then to see how SNRP can actually take up the recommendations. And especially, I think the third one you had on multi-stakeholders and involving different actors, I think would be quite critical in this sense.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the chat if Omar... Okay. So yeah, thank you very much. I think it was great to connect and discuss. It appears that we have some actions. And as Valerio said, Akmal really wanted to be here, but his travel plans has changed. So he's sorry, but I'm sure we will have opportunities for Akmal to join and guide us. And then I would like to give floor maybe for the closure, since Akmal is not here, to Isabel. And you can delegate any person, Isabel, for the closure. Over to you.
Thank you, Murat. Really sorry that Akmal cannot join us, but I hope we can have another discussion with him also next time. So thank you so much for sharing the findings of the NRM study for Sudan. So I think we have very interesting elements to that we can highlight now when we publish the report. On the way forward, we can still maybe further discuss with Rasha and Ahmed to see what would be the key areas where they want to focus, maybe coming with maybe clear issues that they have identified, as Rasha mentioned, for the livestock sector, for the and to document also, yeah. Then I leave it to you to let us know what is the next step, when we can expect to receive the full report and provide feedback. Maybe Alessandra, she mentioned before leaving that she would be happy to further discuss. So maybe let's schedule another meeting once we have read the full report. Maybe we can invite also IFAD colleagues, which are specialists in NRM, and maybe the PTL, the team leader, technical advisor for Sudan, if Russia feels that it can be useful. So these are my suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasha, for the last voice and feedbacks and guidance.
So I look forward to receiving the report, and then we'll be liaising with Isabel and the team about next steps. Over.
Thank you very much. So, we will talk to the designer. I expect the full report draft is coming next week, unless there is a major issue. But we will share the presentation, and maybe for speeding up the process, executive summary as early as possible, and then we will share the full report next week. And from there on, also with I think Valeria took a note, we will organize a meeting with Akmal's present, definitely, to discuss some of the other issues, as you said, Isabel. So thank you very much, everyone. It was great to catch up with you, and hopefully we will continue our journeys. It was great for me, as I said, going back to this. Really apologies for the delay. I hope it was worth a little bit, and looking forward to continue building up. Take care. Until
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Murat. Thank you, Rasha and Ahmed.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, colleagues from Sudan. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.